My son and daughter-in-law planned to poison me before the will was even read, and they thought they had succeeded. The last cup of tea my daughter-in-law, Chloe, ever served me was meant to be my last. She thought the poison, disguised by the scent of bergamot, would stop my heart. She was wrong, and right now, she and my son are gathered in my living room, dressed in funeral black, but their faces are anything but mournful. They are waiting for my lawyer to arrive, to read the will that will seal the inheritance they believe is just moments away. A cold smile touches my lips. They have no idea I'm watching everything from a rented apartment 3 blocks away, through a tiny camera I wisely installed in a bronze angel statuette. They think I'm dead, the victim of a sudden, tragic heart attack. Such a convenient death. What they don't understand is that when you try to poison a retired accountant, you had better be sure of your numbers, because we never overlook the small details. If you think this is just another mother-in-law saga, you're dead wrong. This is the story of how I survived, and how I'm about to take back everything. To understand why I'm here, faking my own death, and watching my own funeral proceedings, we have to go back 6 months, to the day Michael brought Chloe home to meet me. She appeared on my doorstep like a dream. Blonde hair, sparkling blue eyes, and a smile that could melt the harshest winter. "Elena," she said, her voice like honey as she wrapped me in a hug that was just a little too tight. "Michael has told me so much about you. I've been dying to meet the incredible woman who raised such an amazing man." Even then, a small alarm bell went off in my head. Her words were too polished, too perfect, as if they'd been rehearsed 100 times. But I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being an overprotective mother. I invited them in, where Chloe gushed over everything, from my ceramic collection to the view of the vineyard from my hillside home. Michael just stared at her, hanging on her every word as if it were gospel. Soon, Chloe became a constant presence in our lives, and that's when the cracks started to show. She started small. "Elena, you look a little pale lately," she'd say, her face a mask of concern. "Are you getting enough sleep?" Then she started helping. "Here are your blood pressure pills," she said one morning, holding my prescription bottle. "Let me help you organize them for the week, so there's no confusion." At the time, I thought she was being thoughtful. Now I realize she was studying her weapon. The change in Michael was what truly broke my heart. My son, who used to call me every day, started making excuses about being busy. When I expressed my discomfort with Chloe inserting herself so deeply into my life, Michael dismissed it. "Mom, Chloe is just worried about you. Don't be so sensitive." Sensitive became his new word for me. Then it was forgetful, and later, confused. They were all words Chloe had carefully planted in his head. She was building a narrative, one brick at a time, of an old, frail, sick mother who wasn't in her right mind, one who, if she were to suddenly die from an accidental overdose, no one would question. I tried to talk to Michael, just the two of us, but each time, Chloe would coincidentally appear. She had succeeded in building an invisible wall between my son and me. And then, 2 weeks ago, I heard it. A phone call Chloe thought no one was listening to, where she whispered to a friend that it would all be over soon, and the old woman would be taking a long nap. That's when I knew I couldn't play the part of the naive mother anymore. The game was on, and they had no idea their opponent was a woman with nothing left to lose and an entire will to rewrite. A person's funeral is no place to conduct business, but my son and his dear wife thought otherwise. From my safe house, I watched them on the screen, saw Chloe run her hand over the marble mantelpiece, her eyes gleaming with possession. They thought I was dead. They thought they had won. But they didn't know that an old accountant never makes a move without calculating every last detail. I had spent a lifetime balancing ledgers, finding the mismatched numbers, the truths hidden behind false figures, and my life, in its final months, had become the biggest audit I had ever faced. It all started with vague suspicions, small ripples on a calm lake that only a mother could feel. Chloe entered our lives like a strange wind, bringing with her a dazzling beauty and a perfection that was unsettling. I still remember the first day Michael brought her home. She wore a silk dress the color of jade, a shade that highlighted her piercing blue eyes. The hug she gave me was too tight, too effusive for a stranger. Her compliments flowed like a pre-programmed stream. "Elena, your home is magnificent. Elena, your tea set is so exquisite. Elena, you are so blessed." At first, I dismissed my discomfort, attributing it to the skepticism of old age. I tried to love her, because Michael loved her. My son, the child I had raised single-handedly after my husband passed, looked at Chloe with an adoration I had never seen. He was drunk on her radiance, and I, as a mother, only wanted to see my child happy. But then, the small ripples began to grow. Chloe started her campaign subtly, with sweet words of concern. "Elena, you look a little pale lately. Are you getting enough sleep? Or, did you remember to take your blood pressure medication on time? I worry about you so much." Those words, so loving on the surface, were deliberately sown, not just with me, but with Michael, with friends, with the neighbors. She was painting a portrait of me, that of a frail, forgetful old woman in need of special care. The accountant in me awoke. I don't trust empty words, I trust data. Every morning, I measured my own blood pressure with my personal device, a habit I had maintained for years. I recorded the readings in a small notebook. The numbers did not lie. My blood pressure was perfectly stable, even better than many people my age. While Chloe was telling her story of my declining health, my notebook was telling another story, a story of the truth. Her helpfulness also grew more insistent. One day, she insisted on organizing my weekly pill box for me. "Let me help you, so there is no confusion," she said with a radiant smile. I let her, and I watched. Her hands glided over the pills, her eyes carefully reading each label. At the time, I just thought she was being careful. Looking back now, I know it was not caution. It was research. She was familiarizing herself with her weapon. The final straw came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Michael was at work, and Chloe had said she was going out shopping. I was home alone. I walked into the living room and saw her tablet, still lit up on the coffee table. A sense of curiosity, or perhaps a push from fate, made me pick it up. The screen was unlocked, and the search history appeared before my eyes, as cold and cruel as an indictment. Heart medications fatal in overdose. Natural heart attack symptoms versus drug poisoning. Best inheritance dispute lawyers in California. Decomposition time of digitalis compounds. The blood in my veins turned to ice. The room suddenly felt cold. I had to hold on to the arm of a chair to keep myself steady. This was not an overreaction. This was not the suspicion of old age. This was a carefully planned murder plot. The woman my son loved, the person I had tried to welcome with an open heart, was planning to take my life and everything I owned. I placed the tablet back in its exact original position. My hands did not shake. At that moment, something inside me changed. The softness of a mother vanished, replaced by the cold steel of a survivor. I knew I could not confront her directly. Who would believe an old woman against a young, beautiful, seemingly perfect girl? I would be dismissed as paranoid, as senile. My words would only become more evidence for the story she was building. No, I had to play her game. but I would be the one to write the ending. A search history was an intention, but I needed a confession. I needed to hear it from her own mouth. A few days later, the opportunity came. Chloe told Michael she had an important call with a potential client and needed quiet. She went into the study and closed the door. I went to my own bedroom, leaving the door slightly ajar, and pretended to be napping. I could hear her pacing, and then her voice carried, low but clear enough. It was a sound I will never forget for the rest of my life. Her voice was no longer sweet, no longer concerned. It was cold, calculating, and full of triumph. She was talking to a friend, boasting about her plan. "It is almost done." I swapped her real blood pressure medication in the Sunday pill box. Digoxin. A dose 5 times stronger is enough to send her to meet her husband. Michael will think it was because his mother got confused and took the wrong pill. It is perfect. No one will suspect a thing. I lay still on my bed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. Digoxin, a powerful heart medication, a double-edged sword. In the right dose, it saves lives. In the wrong dose, it kills silently. The greatest pain was not the murder plot itself, but the betrayal of my own son. How blind had he become? He had let this woman poison his mind, turning him into a tool for her greed. The pain of a mother realizing she has utterly failed to teach her child to distinguish right from wrong hurts more than death itself. But I had no time to grieve. I had to act. That very night, when the house was asleep, I slipped out. I drove to a small cafe in a neighboring town, where I had arranged to meet Dr. Miles Warren. Dr. Warren was a man in his 60s, with kind eyes and a deep loyalty to my family. Years ago, when he was a young doctor fresh out of school with nothing to his name, it was my husband who had given him a large, interest-free loan to open his own practice. He always said he was indebted to us. Tonight, I was going to ask him to repay that debt. I sat across from him in a secluded corner and calmly explained everything. I did not cry. I did not ramble. I placed my blood pressure logbook on the table. I showed him the photos I had taken of Chloe's tablet search history, and I recounted every word of the phone call I had overheard. I presented it like an audit report, clear, logical, and irrefutable. Dr. Warren's face shifted from surprise to horror, then to fury. He clenched his fists. "That she-devil," he said, his voice trembling. "Elena, I have to call the police." I shook my head. "The police will investigate. Chloe will deny it. Michael will protect her. They will say I am old, confused. We cannot win that way, Miles. We have to create our own truth." And so, amidst the old wooden tables and the smell of roasted coffee, we devised a bold plan, the plan for my death. Dr. Warren would provide me with a powerful sedative, a drug that, when taken, would slow the heart rate and make breathing shallow and weak, creating a perfect state of feigned death. I would swap the digoxin pill in the Sunday pill box with a harmless vitamin. On Saturday night, I would take the sedative. We would arrange for Michael to be the one to discover me on Sunday morning, and Dr. Warren would be the one who was called. He would use his authority to pronounce me dead from a sudden heart attack due to pre-existing conditions. He would handle the death certificate and insist on respecting the family's privacy to forego an autopsy. Returning home in the early hours of the morning, I felt a strange sense of peace. The fear was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. I walked through my house, touching each familiar object. My wedding photo with my husband, the piano where Michael learned his first notes, the garden where I had spent thousands of hours. I was giving all of this up in order to survive. Saturday evening arrived. I sat alone in my room, holding the small pill Dr. Warren had given me. This was not poison. This was my key to freedom. With a heavy heart but an unshakable will, I took it and descended into darkness. On the day of the will reading, the air in Mr. David Chen's law office was thick with anticipation. I could see it in the way Michael tapped his fingers restlessly on the arm of his chair, and in the bright gleam in Chloe's eyes. They were so close to the finish line. They did not know that I designed this race, and their finish line was merely the starting point of my nightmare. I sat in my rented apartment, sipping ginger tea, the screen in front of me reflecting their naked greed. The grief of a mother had given way to the cold focus of a hunter. Mr. Chen, with the placid face of a seasoned stage actor, began to read. His voice was monotone, devoid of emotion, gliding over the dry legal terms. I had instructed him to do so, to prolong their suspense, to make them savor every second of the wait. Finally, he reached the most important part. My entire estate, including the mansion, the vineyard, the investments, and the savings, is to be left to my only son, Michael Ashford. A soft sigh of relief escaped Chloe, a small sound that I heard clearly through the microphone. A discreet, triumphant smile crossed her lips. She turned to Michael, placing her hand on his in a proprietary manner. My son did not smile. He just lowered his head, and I wondered if it was a flicker of guilt creeping into his soul. I wondered if he was thinking of the mother he believed had died because of his own negligence. But then, Mr. Chen continued reading, his voice still even. However, this will come with two mandatory, unalterable conditions, which must be executed precisely for the inheritance to take effect. Silence fell over the office. I saw Michael raise his head, his expression puzzled. Chloe stopped caressing his hand, her body tensing. First, Mr. Chen read, Michael Ashford and his wife, Chloe, must live in the hillside mansion for 60 consecutive days, beginning next week. During this period, they are not permitted to sell, lease, mortgage, or alter any asset of significant value within the home. Second, on the 60th day, they must host a grand memorial party at the mansion to celebrate my life and contributions. The party must be attended by all friends, family, and business associates named on the attached list. If any of these two conditions are not strictly met, or if they leave the house for more than 24 hours during the specified period, the entire estate will automatically be transferred to the California Children's Foundation. This will is final and cannot be contested. I saw Chloe's face tighten. Anger flashed in her eyes like lightning, but she quickly extinguished it, masking it with a look of resignation. 60 days. To her, it was just a minor inconvenience, one last eccentric request from the old woman she had just eliminated. 60 days in exchange for a multi-million-dollar fortune. A bargain. I knew what she was thinking. She would endure it. She would play the part of the devoted daughter-in-law for 2 more months. Michael, on the other hand, seemed relieved. I knew my son. He did not see this as a burden. He saw it as an opportunity to do something for his deceased mother, to soothe his gnawing conscience, to host a party to honor me, to live in the house filled with my memories. For him, it was an act of atonement. Mom wanted this, so we will do it, he said to Chloe, his voice firm. Chloe smiled and nodded, but I saw the falseness in it. She did not care about honoring me. She only cared about day 61, when she could plant a for sale sign on the front lawn. As soon as the reading concluded, I turned off the screen. The prey had swallowed the bait, hook, line, and sinker. Now it was time to pull the line. I picked up the phone and called Frank Miller, the private investigator Dr. Warren had recommended. Frank was not what one might imagine a detective to be. He was not loud, not flashy. He was a former military intelligence officer, an expert in technology and psychological warfare. He spoke little, did much, and most importantly, He understood the value of discretion. I had met him once before, in a dimly lit diner. I had told him my story, holding nothing back. He had just listened silently, his sharp eyes analyzing my every word. When I finished, he asked only one thing. "Do you want justice? Or do you want revenge?" "I want both," I replied. Now, over the phone, I told him. "They are in the trap. The plan begins tonight." His mission was clear. Tonight, before Michael and Chloe moved in, his team was to enter the mansion. I had already disabled the alarm system remotely. He was to install additional audio and video devices, the most sophisticated kinds, in every corner of the house. The bedroom, the living room, the kitchen, my study. I wanted to hear every whisper, see every glance. I wanted a complete record of the 60 days of hell I was about to create for them. And the second mission, the more critical one. Start digging into Chloe's past, or rather, Kimberly Thompson's. I gave him the name. I told him about the case in Palm Springs. Find everything. Financial records, old relationships, unexplained travels, any sudden deaths that occurred around her. I have a feeling my son was not the first victim, and I will not let him be the last. The game had truly begun, and the chessboard was my own home. Frank reported back at dawn, his voice even and professional over the phone. "The house is wired, ma'am. Every corner. From the decorative statues to the smoke detectors. They will not be able to whisper a word without you hearing it." I thanked him and hung up, my eyes fixed on the screen showing the front gate of my house. The chessboard was set. I watched Michael and Chloe move in the next day. They did not bring much. Just Chloe's designer suitcases full of clothes and cosmetics, and a few boxes of Michael's personal items. They crossed the threshold of the house my husband and I had built with love and sweat, like invaders claiming new territory. Chloe walked in, head held high, her eyes scanning the room with unconcealed smugness. Michael followed behind, his shoulders slightly slumped, as if the weight of the house was pressing down on him. The first few days, they were like a newlywed couple enjoying their new estate, at least on the surface. Chloe went from room to room, her hands touching each object, her eyes lighting up as she mentally appraised their value. "Darling, this painting must be worth a fortune," I heard her say to Michael as they stood before the oil painting my husband had bought in Paris. "And your mother's porcelain collection, we must be careful with them." Michael did not share her enthusiasm. "This is Mom's stuff, Chloe. We should respect it." His voice was a little strained, like a gentle reminder. Chloe immediately changed her tone, turning to wrap her arm around his. "Oh, of course, darling. I was just admiring her taste. She was such an extraordinary woman." A smooth lie, uttered with ease. The greatest violation came on the third day, when I saw them in my bedroom, on my bed. I had to close my eyes for a moment, take a deep breath to suppress the rage boiling in my chest. Chloe, with the vigor of a new mistress, had thrown out my favorite hand-embroidered silk bedding. She replaced it with a sleek, cold, soulless black set. "This room needs a little modernizing," she told Michael, her tone as if she were bestowing a great favor. Michael did not object. He just stood there, silently watching his new wife erase his mother's traces. Chloe's patience did not last long. When she was alone, when Michael was at work, she dropped the act. I saw her pacing in the large house, restless and bored. She did not read, did not listen to music, did not garden. She just scrolled through her phone and called her friends. Her voice, through Frank's microphone, was no longer sweet. It was full of complaints and contempt. 60 days. It feels like 60 years. I just want to sell this place and buy a penthouse in Beverly Hills. I hate how quiet it is here. It is driving me crazy. Meanwhile, Michael tried to connect with the past as a way to soothe his own pain. I saw him alone in his father's study, the room I had kept untouched for all these years. He flipped through old leather-bound books, touched the memorabilia on the desk. Once, I saw him sit at the piano, lightly touching the yellowed ivory keys, but he did not play, as if the joy of music had left him along with my passing. He was being torn apart. On one side was his loyalty to his deceased mother. On the other was his blind love for his cunning wife. One night, I heard them argue. A small argument, but a significant one. Michael wanted to invite some of my close friends, those who had been with me through all the difficult years, over for dinner. Chloe objected vehemently. "Why? Your mother is gone. This is our house now. We need our privacy." They were her friends, and this is her house. She wanted us to honor her, not just with a party, Michael said, his voice firm for the first time. "Honoring her with one big party is enough," Chloe snapped. "Don't complicate things, Michael. I am tired of living in a museum." In the end, Michael gave in, as always. He sighed and said, "All right, have it your way." But I knew another crack had appeared in the fortress Chloe had built around him. He was beginning to see the difference between the wife he loved and the woman he was living with. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, my heart a block of ice. I no longer felt pain seeing them desecrate my memories. I only felt a cold disgust and a sense of pity for my foolish son. They were vultures picking at a corpse they did not know was still alive, still watching, and still waiting. 60 days. I would give them 60 days of hell. I would turn their dream house into their psychological prison, and I would be the warden. A house is not merely bricks and mortar. It is a living repository of memories, of habits. It breathes with the lives of those who inhabit it. And I knew every secret of this house. I knew its creaks, its shadows, its soul. From my small, anonymous apartment, I became its ghost, a silent, watchful presence determined to turn their inheritance into a prison of the mind. My war had begun, not with shouts, but with whispers. The first week was a study in subtlety. I used the smart home system, the very one Michael had so proudly installed to make my life easier, as my primary weapon. It started with the lights. The lamp in my old reading nook, a place Chloe never entered, would switch on by itself in the dead of night. Michael would find it in the morning, a soft glow in the otherwise dark room. He would dismiss it as a glitch, a power surge. But it happened again, and again. I saw him on camera, standing in the doorway, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Then came the music. I had a playlist of Chopin nocturnes that I listened to every evening. Now, the music would drift from the surround sound system at odd hours, always faint, almost imperceptible. It was just loud enough to make them stop and ask, "Did you hear that?" Chloe would snap that it was nothing, just the wind. But the sound would find its way into their subconscious, a phantom melody from a life they thought they had extinguished. I watched Chloe's composure begin to fray. She, who thrived on control, was being unnerved by a house that refused to bend to her will. My most personal touches were the most effective. I had given my spare key to Frank. Under the cover of darkness, when they were out for dinner, he would slip in and leave small traces of me behind. The silk shawl I always draped over my favorite armchair would appear neatly folded on their bed. A copy of a book I was reading, with my silver bookmark still inside, would be left on the kitchen counter. These were small, impossible things. They couldn't be explained away as glitches. They were personal, intimate, and deeply unsettling. I watched them argue about the book. Michael picked it up, his face pale. "This is Mom's. It was on her nightstand. How did it get here?" Chloe snatched it from him, her voice sharp with irritation. You probably moved it and forgot. You have been so forgetful lately, Michael. She was turning my own narrative against my son, a cruel irony that was not lost on me. Chloe was the first to break completely. She was a creature of the modern world, of tangible things, of money and power. She had no defense against the intangible. The house, with its quiet dignity and its lingering memories of me, became her tormentor. I saw her pacing restlessly, jumping at every small sound. She started talking to herself, her voice a low, angry murmur caught by Frank's microphones. This place is creepy. It's like she's still here, watching. Michael tried to be the voice of reason, but he was fighting his own demons. The guilt over my death was a heavy cloak he wore every day. For him, these strange occurrences were not just glitches or coincidences. They were signs, penance. He started spending more and more time in his father's study, the one room Chloe seemed to avoid. I watched him run his hands over the old wooden desk, his father's reading glasses still lying where they had been left. He was seeking refuge in the past, in a time before Chloe, a time when our family was whole. Their relationship, once a picture of doting affection, began to sour. The strain was constant. The house was no longer a prize to be enjoyed, but a haunted battleground. Their conversations became clipped, filled with accusations. You're being paranoid, Chloe, Michael would say. And she would retort, and you're being blind. Can you not feel it? This house is wrong. While they were trapped in their psychological prison, Frank was unearthing the skeletons in Chloe's closet. He called me one evening, his voice as calm as ever, but the information he delivered sent a chill through my veins. He had confirmed it. Chloe was indeed Kimberly Thompson. But the story was far darker than I had imagined. The businessman in Palm Springs was not her only victim. Frank had discovered a pattern. Before the businessman, there was a retired professor in Santa Fe, a widower with a significant art collection. Kimberly had been his companion, his caregiver. He too had died of a sudden illness. His will mysteriously changed just weeks before his death, leaving a substantial portion of his collection to her. The family had contested it, but without proof of foul play, they had lost. And before the professor, there was another, an expatriate in Naples. The details were murkier, but the pattern was the same. A lonely, wealthy older man, a beautiful, caring young woman, a sudden death, a convenient inheritance. My heart went cold. This was not a predator. This was a monster wearing the skin of an angel. She had a system, a refined method of emotional and financial vampirism, culminating in murder when the time was right. She had done it before, and she had gotten away with it. She believed she was invincible. That night, as I watched Chloe sleep fitfully in my bed, I felt no pity. I felt the cold, hard resolve of a protector. My son was a fool, a willing pawn in her deadly game. But he was still my son, and I was not just fighting for my own justice anymore. I was fighting to stop her from ever doing this to another family, another lonely man, another foolish son. The ghost in the house was no longer just a tool for psychological torment. It was now an instrument of justice. The stakes had been raised, and I knew my next move had to be flawless. The storm arrived on a Tuesday night near the end of the first month, a furious tempest that seemed to mirror the turmoil inside the house. Wind howled like a grieving animal, and rain lashed against the windows. It was the perfect cover. Nature itself was providing the soundtrack for the next act of my play. I sat in my apartment, a cup of hot tea warming my hands, and watched the screens. Tonight, I would push them over the edge. As the storm reached its peak, I accessed the smart home security system. With a few clicks, I tripped the main alarm. The house erupted in a deafening, piercing shriek. Red lights flashed, bathing the rooms in an infernal glow. It was a sensory assault designed to shatter what little composure they had left. I watched them scramble out of bed. Michael was confused, trying to make sense of the chaos. Chloe was pure terror. Her face, caught in the flashing red lights, was a mask of primal fear. "This is it!" I heard her scream over the alarm. "Someone is in the house. It's her. She's come back." Michael tried to calm her, shouting that it was just the storm, that a tree branch must have hit a sensor. But his own hands were shaking as he fumbled with the control panel. I let the alarm blare for a full 2 minutes before deactivating it remotely. The sudden silence that followed was almost as jarring as the noise itself. In that silence, Chloe completely unraveled. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing, her body shaking. "I can't do this anymore, Michael. I can't live in this house. It's cursed. She is everywhere. She's trying to drive me insane." This was the moment I had been waiting for. The breaking point, when her guard was down, when she felt cornered and desperate. People reveal their true selves not in moments of triumph, but in moments of terror. The next day, she made the call. She thought Michael was out for a run. She sat in the living room, her back to one of Frank's hidden cameras, and dialed a number. It was her friend, the same one she had spoken to before my faked death. This time, there was no boasting, only raw, unfiltered frustration and venom. I listened, my entire being focused on the audio feed. Frank recorded her voice, sharp and ugly. "I can't take it anymore. This place is a nightmare. I think the old bitch is actually haunting it. And Michael, he is useless. He just walks around with that sad puppy dog face, talking about his mother's memory. I wish I had given her a stronger dose." And then came the words that would seal her fate. "Michael is even dumber than that old fool in Palm Springs. All it took was a little fake love to get the whole fortune. This one is taking forever." I had it. A full confession, laced with contempt for my son. It was more than enough to expose her. But simply sending the recording to the police felt unsatisfying. It was too clean, too impersonal. Justice, I believed, needed to be witnessed. My son needed to see the monster he had married, not just hear about her. He needed to be a participant in her unmasking. So I devised a new strategy. I would not reveal my hand all at once. I would give him a single, poisoned dart of truth and see what he did with it. I had Frank isolate one sentence from the recording. Just one. "Michael is even dumber than that old fool in Palm Springs." He sent the audio file to Michael's phone from an anonymous, untraceable number. No context, no explanation. Just that one brutal line in his wife's voice. I watched him receive the message. He was in his father's study. He listened to it once, then again, and a third time. The color drained from his face. He sat down heavily in the leather chair, the phone clutched in his hand. He looked like a man who had been physically struck. The confrontation that evening was a masterclass in manipulation. Michael played the audio for her. His voice was quiet, trembling. "What is this, Chloe? Explain this." For a split second, I saw panic in her eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a torrent of tears. She collapsed into his arms, her body racked with sobs. "It's a fake. It's a deep fake. Oh, Michael, can't you see what's happening? Her friends, your mother's friends, they hate me. They're trying to tear us apart. They're using technology to frame me. How could you even think for a second that I would say such a thing?" She was brilliant. She took his accusation and twisted it, making him the villain for his lack of faith, making herself the tragic victim of a cruel conspiracy. She cried. She pleaded. She professed her undying love. And my son, my foolish, broken son, chose to believe her. He deleted the audio file. He held her, comforted her, and promised her he would never doubt her again. He chose the beautiful lie over the ugly truth. But as I watched him that night, I saw a change. He thought Chloe was asleep. He stood by the window, looking out into the darkness, and his face was no longer just sad. It was hard, wary. He had accepted her explanation, but the poison had entered his system. The seed of doubt, once planted, does not die so easily. It grows in the dark, its roots wrapping around the heart. He was no longer a blind fool. He was a man waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I knew the stage was now perfectly set for the final act. The 60th day arrived, cloaked in the deceptive calm of a perfect California evening. The house, which had been a theater of psychological warfare, was now transformed. White linens draped the tables, hundreds of candles cast a warm, flickering glow, and the air was filled with the scent of lilies, my favorite flower. It was a perfect picture of loving remembrance, a perfect stage for a spectacular fall from grace. From my apartment, I watched the guests arrive. They were all there, just as the list in my will had stipulated. Old friends who had shared decades of laughter with me, family members who thought they were mourning my loss, Michael's colleagues, my former business partners. They streamed in, their faces etched with somber respect. They were the audience for my final performance. Michael and Chloe stood at the entrance, playing their roles to perfection. Michael, handsome in a dark suit, looked every bit the grieving son. His eyes were shadowed with a genuine sadness that pained me to see. He was mourning a mother he thought he had lost. He had no idea he was about to lose so much more. Chloe was a vision in a simple, elegant black dress. She was the picture of the devoted, supportive wife, her hand resting gently on Michael's arm, her voice a soft murmur of comfort as she greeted the guests. She was radiant, confident, believing she was just hours away from her ultimate victory. The centerpiece of the evening was the tribute video. A large screen had been set up in the main hall. At the appropriate moment, after the speeches and toasts, the lights would dim and the video would play. It was meant to be a celebration of my life. It would be, but not in the way anyone expected. I watched as Michael stepped up to the podium. He spoke of me, his voice thick with emotion. He spoke of my strength, my love, my guidance. He spoke of his regret, of the things he wished he had said. It was a beautiful, heartfelt eulogy. For a moment, watching my son speak with such love, my resolve wavered. But then I looked at Chloe, standing beside him, her face a perfect mask of sorrow, and the steel returned to my spine. This was not for me. This was for him, to save him from the monster standing by his side. The lights dimmed. The video began. It started, as planned, with a montage of happy memories, me holding a baby Michael in my arms, family vacations to Hawaii, Michael's high school graduation, laughter, smiles, moments frozen in time. The room was silent, captivated. I saw tears streaming down Michael's face, and then the image flickered. The gentle music faded. The screen changed. It was no longer a memory. It was a grainy video, shot from a hidden camera. The footage showed Chloe in the living room, whispering conspiratorially with a man I recognized as a notorious local art dealer. Frank had set up the meeting. Chloe was haggling over the price of the Parisian painting, the one my husband had bought for our honeymoon. "I want it gone before we sell the house," she was saying. "No paper trail, cash only." A collective gasp went through the room. The guests murmured, confused. Michael stared at the screen, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. He looked at Chloe, but she was frozen, her eyes wide with horror. Before she could speak, the screen went black. And then, from every speaker in the house, a voice echoed, amplified, crystal clear. It was Chloe's voice, from the phone call Frank had recorded. "I can't take it anymore. This place is a nightmare. I think the old bitch is actually haunting it. And Michael, he is useless. He just walks around with that sad puppy dog face, talking about his mother's memory. I wish I had given her a stronger dose. Michael is even dumber than that old fool in Palm Springs. All it took was a little fake love to get the whole fortune." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical thing, a heavy, suffocating blanket that fell over the entire room. Every single guest, every friend, every family member turned as one to stare at Chloe. Her mask was gone. Her face was a grotesque canvas of pure terror. Michael did not look at her. He looked at the screen, then at the stunned faces of the guests, then back at the screen. The truth, in all its brutal, ugly glory, was crashing down on him. The glitches, the whispers, the audio clip, it all clicked into place. He stumbled back, away from her, as if her very presence was toxic. It was at that precise moment, at the peak of the silence and the horror, that the grand double doors of the main hall swung open. I walked in. I was dressed in a simple, elegant white dress, a stark contrast to the sea of black. I walked slowly, deliberately, my gaze fixed on my son and the woman who had tried to destroy us. The crowd parted before me like the Red Sea. Gasps and cries of disbelief filled the air. I stopped in the center of the room, directly in front of them. I looked at Chloe's terrified face. I looked at my son's broken, shattered expression. And I smiled, a calm, serene smile that held no warmth, only the cold, satisfying finality of a perfectly executed plan. Surprise, my darlings. The chaos that erupted was immediate, but it felt distant to me, like watching a storm from behind a thick pane of glass. There were shouts, cries of disbelief, the frantic shuffling of feet as guests backed away from Chloe as if she were a venomous snake. Through it all, I stood perfectly still, my eyes locked on my son. He was on his knees, his head in his hands, his body shaking with violent, silent sobs. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking inward, at the ruins of the world he thought he knew. Chloe, on the other hand, stared only at me. The terror on her face had been replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. If looks could kill, I would have died a second, very real death right there on the marble floor. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She was a cornered animal, all pretense stripped away, revealing the vicious predator beneath. Then, the flashing red and blue lights filled the long driveway, just as Frank had arranged. 2 uniformed police officers entered the hall, their presence bringing a new, official gravity to the unfolding drama. They walked directly towards Chloe. One of them began to speak, his voice calm and authoritative. "Kimberly Thompson, also known as Chloe Ashford, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and suspicion of attempted murder." As they cuffed her, she finally spoke, her voice a low, venomous hiss directed only at me. "You old bitch, you think you've won? You've destroyed your own son to get to me." I did not respond. I simply watched as they led her away, a monster being dragged back into the darkness. I knew that with Frank's meticulously gathered evidence, the recordings, the financial trails, and my testimony, she would not see the light of day for a very, very long time. The police in Palm Springs and Santa Fe would be very interested to hear from their colleagues in California. Justice for her other victims was now a possibility. When she was gone, the house fell silent again. The guests, uncertain what to do, began to leave quietly, casting pitying or curious glances at me and my broken son. Soon, only we remained, in the vast, lily-scented room, surrounded by the remnants of a party that had become a public execution. Michael finally looked up at me. His face was a wreck, ravaged by tears and self-loathing. "Mom," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He crawled towards me, trying to grasp my hand. I stepped back. The movement was small, but it was a clear rejection. My heart ached for him, for the boy he had been. But the woman I had become could not offer easy comfort. Love is not a weakness, I have learned. And forgiveness, without consequence, is meaningless. "Forgiveness is a long road, Michael," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It is not something I can give you tonight. It is something you must earn for yourself." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not a villain, but a weak man, a man whose desire to be loved had made him blind, a man who had failed every test of character. The next day, I met with Mr. Chen. I instructed him to execute the final clause of my will. Because the conditions had been so publicly and spectacularly violated, the entire estate, the house, the vineyard, the stocks, everything was transferred to the California Children's Foundation. Michael was left with nothing but the clothes on his back and the crushing weight of his own actions. It was a harsh punishment, but it was a necessary one. He needed to hit rock bottom to have any hope of finding himself again. I never set foot in the mansion again. Its memories were tainted, its beauty spoiled. I had it sold, and the proceeds were added to the donation. I did not need it. I had my own money, my own investments that I had carefully kept separate, a nest egg for a future I never knew I would have. I moved to a small city on the coast, a place where the sea air was clean and no one knew my name. I bought a modern penthouse apartment with a wide balcony overlooking the ocean. I spent my days walking on the beach, reading books, and learning to be just Elena again. Not a wife, not a mother, but a woman, a survivor. Months later, a letter arrived. It was from Michael. My hands were steady as I opened it. He wrote that he was in therapy. He had found a menial job in a warehouse. He was living in a small, rented room. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for pity. He wrote about his shame, his guilt, and his slow, painful journey to understand how he had gone so wrong. The letter ended with a single, humble request. He just wanted to know if, one day, I might be willing to talk to him. I folded the letter and placed it on the table beside me. I did not know how I would respond. Perhaps one day, perhaps not. I walked out onto my balcony and looked at the sunset painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and pink. The world was vast and beautiful. I had fought a war in the quiet rooms of my own home and emerged victorious. I had lost a son, but I had found myself. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I raised a glass of wine to the future, a future that was, for the first time in a very long time, entirely my own. My toast to the future hung in the salty air, the crystal glass cool against my fingertips. For a few weeks, that future felt real, tangible. The rhythm of the waves became my new clock, washing away the frantic, sharp-edged memories of my other life. I read novels, not ledgers. I spoke to neighbors about the weather, not to lawyers about my will. The past was a sealed room, and I had walked away with the only key. But the most dangerous thing about a monster like Chloe isn't the evil you see. It's the evil you don't. It's the poison that seeps into the foundations long before the house collapses. The first tremor came in the form of a certified letter. It wasn't from Michael. It was from a premier wealth management firm in Zurich, a name I knew only by its stellar, impenetrable reputation. My hands were steady as I opened it. An accountant doesn't fear official correspondence. But as I read the crisp, formal language, the blood in my veins turned to ice all over again. The letter was a polite but firm inquiry regarding unusual activity on an account held in my name, Elena Ashford. It referenced a recent series of large international transfers and a pending transaction that would liquidate the account's entire seven-figure balance. It was a courtesy notice before executing the final transfer. I had never opened an account in Zurich in my life. My serene coastal world tilted on its axis. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of cold, focused dread that was unnervingly familiar. I made a call to the one person I knew could move with the necessary speed and discretion. "Frank," I said, my voice as even as a line on a balance sheet. "I need you again." What Frank Miller unearthed over the next week was a masterpiece of malevolent genius. It was Chloe's real endgame, a contingency plan so brilliant and cruel it made the poison seem almost merciful. The digoxin was Plan A, a swift, brutal path to the inheritance. This was Plan B, a slow, meticulous campaign designed not just to steal from me, but to obliterate me. Using sophisticated forgeries of my signature and a labyrinth of digital proxies, Chloe, or rather Kimberly, had spent the last year building a second shadow financial identity for me. She'd funneled money from small, untraceable sales of my antiques and jewelry into this secret Zurich account. The funds from the art dealer I'd caught her with on camera were just the tip of the iceberg. She had been bleeding me dry in a dozen different ways. But the theft was not the checkmate. The trap was in the transactions. The money was being moved through a network of shell corporations linked to known international crime syndicates. It was a classic money laundering scheme. Chloe's plan was diabolical in its simplicity. If the poison failed, she would trigger this final transfer. The authorities, alerted by the bank, would trace this vast, dirty financial web directly back to its source, a seemingly respectable widow named Elena Ashford. She had been building a cage around me all along. Had I lived, she would have exposed it. I would have been ruined, disgraced, my name synonymous with financial crime, with my credibility destroyed. Who would ever believe my stories about her? She would have painted me as a senile old woman who turned to crime, using that as grounds to have me committed and to gain control of my remaining legitimate assets as my conservator. She hadn't just wanted me dead. She had wanted to own my life, my legacy, my very identity. And if I died from a heart attack, the money in Zurich would be an untraceable bonus, wired to an anonymous account in the Cayman Islands, belonging to an unknown accomplice. An accomplice. The word echoed in my mind. The friend she'd boasted to on the phone. The one who would get the money if I died. Chloe was in a maximum security prison, but her phantom partner was still out there, ready to collect on their investment. My victory felt hollow. A single battle won in a war I didn't even know I was fighting. I had survived my own murder only to be framed for a federal crime. Defeated, I sat in my sterile, beautiful apartment, the ocean a mocking expanse of freedom outside my window. I was trapped. To prove my innocence, I'd have to reveal everything, my faked death, the 60-day charade. The legal fallout would be immense, and even then, it would be my word against a mountain of expertly fabricated evidence. Chloe's ghost was reaching from its prison cell to pull me down into the mud with her. My eyes fell on the letter from Michael, still sitting on the table. I had read it a dozen times, my heart a cold stone in my chest. It was filled with the self-pitying remorse of a broken man. But as I scanned the pathetic looping script again, one sentence snagged my attention, a detail I had previously dismissed as irrelevant. I remember asking her once about her finances, he wrote. She was always on the phone with some consultant, a man named Silas. She said he managed her offshore ventures, and she was so proud of how clever she was, how she was smarter than all the old men she knew. Silas. The name was a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. This wasn't just a friend. This was her partner, the architect of my ruin. And Michael, in his blind devotion, had been privy to the conversations. He had heard the names, the places, the casual details that a criminal mastermind would never write down. He was a fool, a pawn, the instrument of my near destruction. But he was also the one person who had been inside the enemy's camp. He was a living archive of Chloe's arrogance. For the first time since this nightmare began, my path forward wasn't about the past. It wasn't about punishing Michael or grieving what we had lost. It was a cold, pragmatic calculation. I was an accountant facing a hostile audit, and I needed data. He was my only source. My hand did not shake as I picked up my phone. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, the beautiful orange and pink hues now feeling like a warning. Forgiveness was still a distant country I had no plans to visit. But survival? Survival was my home turf. I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring, his voice a choked, hopeful whisper. Mom. I took a breath, the salty air filling my lungs. The hunt was on again. Michael, I said, my voice steady and sharp as steel. We need to talk.